My name is Christiana Hale, and I'm a teacher and writer for Roman Roads Media. I have taught several classes. I'm teaching a good books literature class for them this coming fall, and they are also going to be publishing a book that I've written on C.S. Lewis's Ransom Trilogy, announcement forthcoming. And I'm going to be reading book 2 from the Iliad using Robert Fagel's translation. I like that his is a slightly more modern take. It has a lot of good rhythms, and he keeps a lot of the rhythm of the original poetry, which is really enjoyable to read. It has a nice sound to it. The Iliad, Book 2. Now the great array of gods and chariot-driving men slept all night long, but the peaceful grip of sleep could not hold Zeus, turning it over in his mind. How to exalt Achilles, how to slaughter hordes of Achaeans pinned against their ships. As his spirit churned, at last one plan seemed best. He would send a murderous dream to Agamemnon. Calling out to the vision, Zeus winged it on. Go, murderous dream, to the fast Achaean ships, and once you reach Agamemnon's shelter, rouse him. Order him, word for word, exactly as I command. Tell Atrides to arm his long-haired Achaeans, to attack at once, full force. Now he can take the broad streets of Troy. The immortal gods who hold Olympus clash no more. Hera's appeals have brought them round, and all agree. Griefs are about to crush the men of Troy. At that command, the dream went winging off, and passing quickly along the fast trim ships, made for the king and found him soon, sound asleep in his tent, with refreshing God-sent slumber drifted round him. Hovering at his head, the vision rose like Nestor, Neleus' son, the chief Agamemnon honored most. Inspired with Nestor's voice and sent by Zeus, the dream cried out, "Still asleep, Agamemnon, the son of Atreus, that skilled breaker of horses? How can you sleep all night, a man weighed down with duties? Your armies turning over their lives to your command, responsibilities so heavy. Listen to me quickly. I bring you a message sent by Zeus, a world away, but he has you in his heart. He pities you now. Zeus commands you to arm your long-haired Achaeans, to attack at once, full force. Now you can take the broad streets of Troy. The immortal gods who hold Olympus clash no more. Hera's appeals have brought them round, and all agree. Griefs from Zeus are about to crush the men of Troy. But keep this message firmly in your mind. Remember, let no loss of memory overcome you when the sweet grip of slumber sets you free." With that, the dream departed, leaving him there, his heart racing with hopes that would not come to pass. He thought he would take the city of Priam then, that very day, the fool. How could he know what work the father had in mind? The father, still bent on plaguing the Argives and Trojans both, with wounds and groans in the bloody press of battle. But rousing himself from sleep, the divine voice swirling around him, Atrides sat up, bolt awake, pulled on a soft tunic, linen never worn, and over it threw his flaring battle cape. Under his smooth feet he fastened supple sandals, across his shoulder slung his silver-studded sword. Then he seized the royal scepter of his fathers. Its power can never die, and grasping it tightly, off he strode to the ships of Argives armed in bronze. Now the goddess Dawn climbed up to Olympus heights, declaring the light of day to Zeus and the deathless gods, as the king commanded heralds to cry out loud and clear and muster the long-haired Achaeans to full assembly. Their cries rang out, battalions gathered quickly. But first he called his ranking chiefs to council beside the ship of Nestor, the warlord born in Pylos. Summoning them together there, Atrides set forth his cunning, foolproof plan. "Hear me, friends, a dream sent by the gods has come to me in sleep. Down through the bracing God-sent night it came, like good Nestor in features, height and build, the old king himself. And hovering at my head, the dream called me on. Still asleep, Agamemnon, the son of Atreus, that skilled breaker of horses? How can you sleep all night, a man weighed down with duties? Your armies turning over their lives to your command, responsibilities so heavy, listen to me quickly. I bring you a message sent by Zeus, a world away, but he has you in his heart. He pities you now. Zeus commands you to arm your long-haired Achaeans, to attack at once, full force. Now you can take the broad streets of Troy. The immortal gods who hold Olympus clash no more. Hera's appeals have brought them round, and all agree. Griefs from Zeus are about to crush the men of Troy, but keep this message firmly in your mind. With that, the dream went winging off, and soothing sleep released me. Come, see if we can arm the Achaeans for assault. But first, according to time-honored custom, I will test the men with a challenge. Tell them all to crowd the oarlocks, cut and run in their ships. But you take up your battle stations at every point. Command them, hold them back. So much for his plan. Agamemnon took his seat, and Nestor rose among them. Noble Nestor, the king of Pylos' sandy harbor, spoke, and urged them on with all goodwill. Friends, lord of the Argives, O my captains, if any other Achaean had told us of this dream, we'd call it false, and turn our backs upon it. But look, the man who saw it has every claim to be the best, the bravest Achaean we can field. Come, see if we can arm the Achaeans for assault. And out he marched, leading the way from council. The rest sprang to their feet. The sceptred kings obeyed the great field marshal. Rank and file streamed behind and rushed like swarms of bees, pouring out of a rocky hollow, burst on endless burst. Bunched in clusters seething over the first spring blooms, dark hordes swirling into the air, this way, that way. So the many armed platoons from the ships and tents came marching on, close file, along the deep, wide beach to crowd the meeting grounds, and Rumor, Zeus's crier, like wildfire blazing among them, whipped them on. The troops assembled. The meeting grounds shook. The earth groaned and rumbled under the huge weight as soldiers took positions, the whole place in uproar. 9 heralds shouted out, trying to keep some order. Quiet, battalions! Silence! Hear your royal kings! The men were forced to their seats, marshaled into ranks. The shouting died away. Silence. King Agamemnon rose to his feet, raising high in hand the scepter Hephaestus made with all his strength and skill. Hephaestus gave it to Cronus' son, Father Zeus, and Zeus gave it to Hermes, the giant-killing guide, and Hermes gave it to Pelops, that fine charioteer. Pelops gave it to Atreus, marshal of fighting men, who died and passed it on to Thyestes rich in flocks, and he in turn bestowed it on Agamemnon, to bear on high as he ruled his many islands and lorded mainland Argos. Now, leading his weight upon that kingly scepter, Atrides declared his will to all Achaea's armies. Friends, fighting Danaans, aids in arms of Ares, Cronus' son has trapped me in madness, blinding ruin. Zeus is a harsh, cruel god. He vowed to me long ago, he bowed his head, that I should never embark for home till I had brought the walls of Ilium crashing down. But now, I see, he only plotted brutal treachery. Now he commands me back to Argos in disgrace. Whole regiments of my men destroyed in battle. So it must please his overweening heart, who knows? Father Zeus has lopped the crowns of 1,000 cities, true, and Zeus will lop still more. His power is too great. What humiliation, even for generations still to come, to learn that Achaean armies so strong, so vast, fought a futile war. We are still fighting it, no end in sight, and battling forces we outnumber, by far. Say that Trojans and Argives both agreed to swear a truce, to seal their oaths in blood, and opposing sides were tallied out in full. Count one by one the Trojans who live in Troy, but count our Achaeans out by 10-man squads, and each squad pick a Trojan to pour its wine. Many Achaeans' tens would lack their steward then. That's how far we outnumber them, I'd say, Achaeans to Trojans, the men who hail from Troy at least. But they have allies called from countless cities, fighters brandishing spears who block my way, who throw me far off course, thwarting my will to plunder Ilium's rugged walls. And now 9 years of almighty Zeus have marched by, our ship timbers rot and the cables snap and fray, and across the sea our wives and helpless children wait in the halls, wait for our return. And we? Our work drags on, unfinished as always, hopeless, the labor of war that brought us here to Troy. So come, follow my orders, all obey me now, cut and run, sail home to the fatherland we love, we'll never take the broad streets of Troy. Testing his men, but he only made the spirit race inside their chests, all the rank and file who'd never heard his plan, and the whole assembly surged like big waves at sea, the Icarian sea when east and south winds drive it on, blasting down in force from the clouds of Father Zeus, or when the west wind shakes the deep-standing grain with hurricane gusts that flatten down the stalks. So the massed assembly of troops was shaken now. They cried in alarm and charged toward the ships, and the dust went whirling up from under rushing feet as the men jostled back and forth, shouting orders. Grapple the ships, drag them down to the bright sea, clean out the launching channels. Shrill shouts hitting the heavens, fighters racing for home, knocking the blocks out underneath the hulls. And now they might have won their journey home, the men of Argos fighting the will of fate, yes, if Hera had not alerted Athena. Inconceivable! Child of Zeus, whose battle shield is thunder, tireless one Athena, what, is this the way? All the Argives flying home to their fatherland, sailing over the sea's broad back, leaving Priam and all the men of Troy a trophy to glory over, Helen of Argos, Helen for whom so many Argives lost their lives in Troy, far from native land. Go, range the ranks of Achaeans armed in bronze. With your winning words, hold back each man you find. Don't let them haul their rolling ships to sea. The bright-eyed goddess Pallas lost no time. Down she flashed from the peaks of Mount Olympus, quickly reached the ships and found Odysseus first, a mastermind like Zeus, still standing fast. He had not laid a hand on his black-benched hull, such anguish racked his heart and fighting spirit. Now close beside him the bright-eyed goddess stood and urged him on. Royal son of Laertes, Odysseus, great tactician, what, is this the way? All you Argives flying home to your fatherland, tumbling into your oar-swept ships, leaving Priam and all the men of Troy a trophy to glory over, Helen of Argos, Helen for whom so many Argives lost their lives in Troy, far from native land. No, don't give up now. Range the Achaean ranks. With your winning words, hold back each man you find. Don't let them haul their rolling ships to sea. He knew the goddess' voice. He went on the run, flinging off his cape as Eurybates picked it up, the herald of Ithaca always at his side. Coming face to face with Atrides, Agamemnon, he relieved him of his father's royal scepter, its power can never die, and grasping it tightly, off he strode to the ships of Argives armed in bronze. Whenever Odysseus met some man of rank, a king, he'd halt and hold him back with winning words. My friend, it is wrong to threaten you like a coward, but you stand fast. You keep your men in check. It's too soon to see Agamemnon's purpose clearly. Now he's only testing us. Soon he'll bear down hard. Didn't we all hear his plan in secret council? God forbid his anger destroy the army he commands. The rage of kings is strong. They're nursed by the gods. Their honor comes from Zeus. They are dear to Zeus, the god who rules the world. When he caught some common soldier shouting out, he'd beat him with the scepter, dress him down. You fool, sit still, obey the commands of others, your superiors. You deserter, rank coward, you count for nothing, neither in war nor council. How can all Achaeans be masters here in Troy? Too many kings can ruin an army, mob rule. Let there be one commander, one master only, endowed by the son of crooked-minded Cronus, with kingly scepter and royal rights of custom, whatever one man needs to lead his people well. So he ranged the ranks, commanding men to order, and back again they surged from ships and shelters, back to the meeting grounds with a deep pounding din, thundering out as battle lines of breakers crash and drag along some endless beach and the rough sea roars. The armies took their seats, marshaled into ranks, but one man, Thersites, still railed on non-stop. His head was full of obscenities, teeming with rant, all for no good reason, insubordinate, baiting the kings, anything to provoke some laughter from the troops. Here was the ugliest man who ever came to Troy. Bandy-legged he was, with one foot clubbed, both shoulders humped together, curving over his caved-in chest, and bobbing above them his skull warped to a point, sprouting clumps of scraggly, woolly hair. Achilles despised him most, Odysseus too. He was always abusing both chiefs, but now he went for majestic Agamemnon, hollering out, taunting the king with strings of cutting insults. The Achaeans were furious with him, deeply offended, but he kept shouting at Agamemnon, spewing his abuse. Still moaning and groaning, mighty Atrides, why now? What are you panting after now? Your shelters packed with the lion's share of bronze, plenty of women, too, crowding your lodges. Best of the lot, the beauties we hand you first whenever we take some stronghold, or still more gold you're wanting, more ransom a son of the stallion-breaking Trojans might just fetch from Troy. Though I or another hero drags him back in chains, or a young woman is it, to spread and couple to bed down for yourself apart from all the troops. How shameful for you, the high and mighty commander, to lead the sons of Achaea into bloody slaughter. Sons? No, my soft friends, wretched excuses. Women, not men of Achaea. Home we go in our ships. Abandon him here in Troy to wallow in all his prizes. He'll see if the likes of us have propped him up or not. Look, now it's Achilles, a greater man he disgraces, seizes and keeps his prize, tears her away himself. But no gall in Achilles. Achilles lets it go. If not, Atrides, that outrage would have been your last. Though so Thersites taunted the famous field marshal, but Odysseus stepped in quickly, faced him down with a dark glance, and threats to break his nerve. What a flood of abuse, Thersites, even for you, fluent and flowing as you are. Keep quiet. Who are you to wrangle with kings, you alone? No one, I say, no one alive less soldierly than you, none in the ranks that came to Troy with Agamemnon. So stop your babbling, mouthing the names of kings, flinging indecencies in their teeth, your eyes peeled for a chance to cut and run for home. We can have no clear idea at all how the long campaign will end, whether Achaea's sons will make it home unharmed or slink back in disgrace. But there you sit, hurling abuse at the son of Atreus, Agamemnon, marshal of armies, simply because our fighters give Atrides the lion's share of all our plunder. You and your ranting slander, you're the outrage. I tell you this, so help me, it's the truth. If I catch you again blithering on this way, let Odysseus's head be wrenched off his shoulders. Never again call me the father of Telemachus. If I don't grab you, strip the clothing off you, cloak, tunic, and rags that wrap your private parts, and whip you howling naked back to the fast ships, out of the army's muster, whip you like a cur. And he cracked the scepter across his back and shoulders. The rascal doubled over, tears streaking his face, and a bloody welt bulged up between his blades under the stroke of the golden scepter's studs. He squatted low, cringing, stunned with pain, blinking like some idiot, rubbing his tears off dumbly with a fist. Their morale was low, but the men laughed now, good hearty laughter breaking over Thersites' head. Glancing at neighbors, they would shout, "A terrific stroke! 1,000 terrific strokes he's carried off, Odysseus, taking the lead in tactics, mapping battle plans. But here's the best thing yet he's done for the men. He's put a stop to this babbling, foul-mouthed fool. Never again, I'd say, will our gallant comrade risk his skin to attack the kings with insults." So the soldiers bantered, but not Odysseus. The raider of cities stood there, scepter in hand, and close beside him the great gray-eyed Athena rose like a herald, ordering men to silence. All, from the first to lowest ranks of Achaea's troops, should hear his words and mark his counsel well. For the good of all, he urged them, "Agamemnon, now my king, the Achaeans are bent on making you a disgrace in the eyes of every man alive. Yes, they failed to fulfill their promise sworn that day they sailed here from the Stalian land of Argos, that not until you had razed the rugged walls of Troy would they sail home again. But look at them now, like green defenseless boys or widowed women, whimpering to each other, wailing to journey back. True, they've labored long. They're desperate for home. Any fighter cut off from his wife for 1 month would chafe at the benches, moaning in his ship, pinned down by gales and heavy raging seas. A month. But look at us. This is the 9th year come round, the 9th we've hung on here. Who could blame the Achaeans for chafing, bridling beside the beaked ships? Ah, but still, what a humiliation it would be to hold out so long, then sail home empty-handed. Courage, my friends, hold out a little longer, till we see if Calchas divined the truth or not. We all recall that moment. Who could forget it? We were all witnesses then. All, at least, the deadly spirits have not dragged away. Why, it seems like only yesterday or the day before, when our vast armada gathered, moored at Aulis, freighted with slaughter, bound for Priam's Troy. We were all busy then, milling round a spring and offering victims up on the holy altars, full sacrifice to the gods to guarantee success, under a spreading plane tree where the water splashed, glittering in the sun, when a great omen appeared. A snake, and his back streaked red with blood, a thing of terror. Olympian Zeus himself had launched him into the clean light of day. He slid from under the altar, glided up the tree, and there the brood of a sparrow, helpless young ones, teetered high on the topmost branch tips, cowering under the leaves there. 8 they were, all told, and the mother made the 9th. She'd borne them all. Chirping to break the heart, but the snake gulped them down, and the mother cried out for her babies, fluttering over him. He coiled, struck, fanging her wing, a high, thin shriek. But once he'd swallowed down the sparrow with her brood, the son of crooked Cronus who sent the serpent forth, turned him into a sign, a monument clear to see. Zeus struck him to stone, and we stood by, amazed that such a marvel came to light. So then, when those terrible monstrous omens burst in on the victims we were offering to the gods, Calchas swiftly revealed the will of Zeus. Why struck dumb now, my long-haired Achaeans? Zeus, who rules the world, has shown us an awesome sign, an event long in the future, late to come to birth, but the fame of that great work will never die. As the snake devoured the sparrow with her brood, ate, and the mother made the ninth, she'd borne them all, so we will fight in Troy that many years, and then in the 10th we'll take her broad streets. So that day the prophet revealed the future, and now, look, by God, it all comes to pass. Up with you, all you Argives geared for combat. Stand your ground right here until we take the mighty walls of Priam. He fired them so the armies roared and the ships resounded round them, shattering echoes ringing from their shouts as Argives cried assent to King Odysseus' words. And Nestor, the great noble horseman, spurred them more. What disgrace! Look at you, carrying on in the army's muster just like boys. Fools! Not a thought in your heads for works of battle. What becomes of them now, the pacts and oaths we swore? Into the flames with counsels, all the plans of men, the vows sealed with the strong, unmixed wine, the firm clasp of the right hand we trusted. We battle on in words, as always, mere words, and what's the cure? We cannot find a thing, no matter how many years we wrangle here. Agamemnon, never swerve, hold to your first plan of action, lead your armies headlong into war. The rest of them? Let them rot, the one or two who hatch their plans apart from all the troops. What good can they win from that? Nothing at all. Why, they'd scuttled home before they can even learn if the vows of Zeus with his dark, cloudy shield are false or not. Zeus, the son of almighty Cronus, I remind you, bowed his head that day we boarded ship, all the Argives laden with blood and death for Troy. His lightning bolts on the right, good omens blazing forth. So now let no man hurry to sail for home, not yet. Not till he beds down with a faithful Trojan wife, payment in full for the groans and shocks of war we have all borne for Helen. But any soldier, wild with desire to reach his home at once, just let him lay a hand on his black bench ship, and right in front of the rest he'll reach his death. But you, my king, be on your guard yourself. Come, listen well to another man. Here's some advice not to be tossed aside, and I will tell it clearly. Range your men by tribes, even by clans, Agamemnon, so clan fights by the side of clan, tribe by tribe. Fight this way if the Argives still obey you. Then you can see which captain is a coward, which contingent too, and which is loyal, brave, since they will fight in separate formations of their own. Then, what's more, if you fail to sack the city, you will know if the will of God's to blame, or the cowardice of your men inept in battle. And King Agamemnon took his lead, saluting. Again, old man, you outfight the Argives in debate. Father Zeus, Athena, Apollo, if only I had 10 men like Nestor to plan with me among Achaea's armies, then we could topple Priam's citadel in a day, throttle it in our hands, and gut Troy to nothing. But Cronus' son Zeus, with his shield of storm, insists on embroiling me in painful struggles, futile wars of words. Imagine, I and Achilles wrangling over a girl, battling man to man. And I was the first to let my anger flare. Ah, if the two of us could ever think as one, Troy could delay her day of death no longer, not one moment. Go now, take your meal, the sooner to bring on war. Quickly, let each fighter sharpen his spear well, balance his shield well, feed his horses well, with plenty of grain to build their racing speed. Each man look well to his chariot's running order, nerve himself for combat now, so all day long we can last out the grueling duels of Ares. No breathing space, no let-up, not a moment, not till the night comes on to part the fighter's fury. Now sweat will soak the shield strap round your chest, your fist gripping the spear will ache with tensing. Now the lather will drench your war team's flanks, hauling your sturdy chariot. But any man I catch, trying to skulk behind his long-beaked ships, hanging back from battle, he is finished. No way for him to escape the dogs and birds. So he commanded, and the armies gave a deep resounding roar like waves crashing against a cliff when the south wind whips it, bearing down some craggy headland jutting out to sea. The waves will never leave it in peace, thrashed by gales that hit from every quarter, breakers left and right. The troops sprang up, scattered back to the ships, lit fires beside their tents, and took their meal. Each sacrificed to one or another deathless god, each man praying to flee death and the grind of war. For the Lord of men, Agamemnon, sacrificed a fat, rich ox, 5 years old, to the son of mighty Cronos, Zeus, and called the chiefs of all the Argive forces. Nestor first and foremost, then King Idomeneus, the great and little Ajax, Tydeus' son Diomedes, and Odysseus' sixth, a mastermind like Zeus. The lord of the war cry Menelaus came uncalled. He knew at heart what weighed his brother down. They stood in a ring around the ox, took up barley, and then, rising among them, King Agamemnon raised his voice in prayer. Zeus, Zeus, God of greatness, God of glory, Lord God of the dark clouds who lives in the bright sky, don't let the sun go down or the night descend on us. Not till I hurl the smoke-black halls of Priam headlong, torch his gates to blazing rubble, rip the tunic of Hector and slash his heroic chest to ribbons with my bronze, and a ruck of comrades around him, groveling face down, gnaw their own earth. And so Agamemnon prayed, but the son of Cronus would not bring his prayer to pass. Not yet. The father accepted the sacrifices, true, but doubled the weight of thankless, ruthless war. Once the men had prayed and flung the barley. First they lifted back the heads of the victims, slit their throats, skinned them and carved away the meat from the thigh bones and wrapped them in fat, a double fold sliced clean and topped with strips of flesh. And they burned these on a cleft stick, peeled and dry, spitted the vitals, held them over Hephaestus' flames. And once they'd charred the thighs and tasted the organs, they cut the rest into pieces, pierced them with spits, roasted them to a turn and pulled them off the fire. The work done, the feast laid out, they ate well, and no man's hunger lacked a share of the banquet. When they had put aside desire for food and drink, Nestor, the old noble horseman, spoke out first. Martial Atrides, lord of men Agamemnon, no more trading speeches now. No more delay, putting off the work that God puts in our hands. Come, let the heralds cry out to all contingents. Full battle armor, muster the men along the ships. Now down we go, united. Review them as we pass down through the vast encampment of Achaea, the faster to rouse the slashing god of war. Agamemnon, the lord of men, did not resist. He commanded heralds to cry out loud and clear and summon the long-haired Achaean troops to battle. Their cries rang out. The battalions gathered quickly. The warlords, dear to the gods and flanking Agamemnon, strode on ahead, marshalling men-at-arms in files, and down their ranks the fiery-eyed Athena bore her awesome shield of storm, ageless, deathless, 100 golden tassels, all of them braided tight, and each worth 100 oxen, float along the front. Her shield of lightning dazzling, swirling around her, headlong on, Athena swept through the Argive armies, driving soldiers harder, lashing the fighting fury in each Achaean's heart, no stopping them now, mad for war and struggle. Now suddenly, battle thrilled them more than the journey home, than sailing hollow ships to their dear native land. As ravening fire rips through big stands of timber high on a mountain ridge, and the blaze flares miles away, so from the marching troops the blaze of bronze armor, splendid and superhuman, flared across the earth, flashing into the air to hit the skies. Armies gathering now as the huge flocks on flocks of winging birds, geese or cranes or swans with their long lancing necks, circling Asian marshes round the Cayster outflow, wheeling in all directions, glorying in their wings, keep on landing, advancing, wave on shrieking wave, and the tidal flats resound. So tribe on tribe, pouring out of the ships and shelters, marched across the Scamander plain, and the earth shook. Tremendous thunder from under trampling men and horses, drawing into position down the Scamander meadow flats, breaking into flower. Men by the thousands, numberless as the leaves and spears that flower forth in spring. The armies massing, crowding thick and fast as the swarms of flies seething over the shepherd's stalls in the first spring days when the buckets flood with milk. So many long-haired Achaeans swarmed across the plain to confront the Trojans, fired to smash their lines. The armies grouping now, as seasoned goat herds split their wide-ranging flocks into packs with ease, when herds have mixed together down the pasture, so the captains form their tight platoons, detaching right and left, moving up for action. And there in the midst strode powerful Agamemnon, eyes and head like Zeus who loves the lightning, great in the girth like Ares, god of battles, broad through the chest like sea lord Poseidon. like a bull rising head and shoulders over the herds, a royal bull rearing over his flocks of driven cattle. So imposing was Atreus' son, so Zeus made him that day, towering over fighters, looming over armies. Sing to me now, you muses who hold the halls of Olympus. You are goddesses, you are everywhere, you know all things. All we hear is the distant ring of glory, we know nothing. Who were the captains of Achaea? Who were the kings, the mass of troops I could never tally, never name, not even if I had 10 tongues and 10 mouths, a tireless voice and the heart inside me bronze, never unless you muses of Olympus, daughters of Zeus, whose shield is rolling thunder, sing, sing in memory all who gathered under Troy. Now I can only tell the lords of the ships and all their numbers. First came the Boeotian units led by Laetus and Pentelos. Arcesilaus and Prothenor and Clonius shared command of the armed men who lived in Hyria, rocky Aulis, Scenius and Scolus and Etonius spurred with hills, Thespia and Graea, the dancing rings of Mycalessus, men who lived round Harma, Elysion and Erythrae, and those who settled Elion, Hyle and Petion, Ocalea, Medion's fortress, walled and strong, Copae, Eutressus, and Thisbe thronged with doves, fighters from Coronea, Haliartus deep in meadows, and the men who held Plataea and lived in Glissus, men who held the rough-hewn gates of lower Thebes, on Kestus the holy, Poseidon's sun-filled grove, men from the town of Arne, green with vineyards, Medea and sacred Nyssa, Anthedon on the marshes. 50 ships came freighted with these contingents, 120 young Boeotians manning each. Then men who lived in Aspledon, or Comenos of the Minions, fighters led by Ascalaphus and Ialmenus, sons of Ares, whom Astyoche bore and Actor son of Asius halls, when the shy young girl climbing into the upper rooms made love with the god of war in secret, shared his strength. In her 2 sons' command sailed 30 long curved ships. Then Schedius and Epistrophus led the men of Phocis, 2 sons of Iphitus, that great heart, now Bolus' son, the men who held Cyparissus and Pythos' high crags, the hallowed earth of Crissa, Daulis, and Panopeus, men who dwelled round Nemoria, round Hyampolis, men who lived along the Cephissus glinting waters, men who held Lilaea close to the river's wellsprings. Laden with all their ranks came 40 long black ships, and Phocian captains ranged them column by column, manning stations along the Boeotians' left flank. Next the Locrians, led by racing Ajax, son of Oileus. Little Ajax, a far cry from the size of Telamonian Ajax, a smaller man but trim in his skin-tight linen corset. He outthrew all Hellenes, all Achaeans with his spear. He led the men who lived in Opus, Sinis, Calliaris, Bessa, and Scarphi, the delightful town of Augae, Tarphi, and Thronian down the Boagrius river. In Oilean Ajax' charge came 40 long black ships, Locrians living across the straits from sacrosanct Euboea. And the men who held Euboea, Abantes breathing fury, Chalcis and Eretria, Histiaea covered with vineyards, Cerinthus along the shore and Dion's hilltop streets, the men who held Charistus and men who settled Styra. Elaphenor, comrade of Ares, led the whole contingent. Chalcodon's son, a lord of the fierce Abantes. The sprinting Abantes followed hard at his heels, their forelocks cropped, hair grown long at the back, troops nerved to lunge with their tough ashen spears and slash the enemy's breastplates round their chests. In Elaphenor's command sailed 40 long black ships. Next, the men who held the strong-built city of Athens, realm of high-hearted Erechtheus, Zeus's daughter Athena tended him once, the grain-giving fields had borne him, long ago, and then she settled the king in Athens, in her own rich shrine, where sons of Athens worship him with bulls and goats, as the years wheel round in season. Athenians all, and Petius' son Menestheus led them on, and no one born on the earth could match that man in arraying teams of horse and shielded fighters. Nestor his only rival, thanks to Nestor's age, and in his command sailed 50 long black ships. Out of Salamis, great Telamonian Ajax led 12 ships, drawn up where Athenian forces formed their line of battle. Then men of Argos and Tiryns with her tremendous walls, and Hermione and Asyne commanding the deep wide gulf, Trozen, Aone, and Epidaurus green with vines, and Achaea's warrior sons who held Aegina and Maces. Diomedes, lord of the war cry, led their crack contingents, flanked by Sthenelus, far-famed Capaneus' favorite son. Third in the vanguard marched Euryalus, strong as a god, son of King Mecistus, son of Talus. But over them all, with cries to martial men, Diomedes led the whole force, and his Argives sailed in 80 long black ships. Next the men who held Mycenae's huge walled citadel, Corinth in all her wealth and sturdy, strong Cleonae, men of Orneae, lovely Erytheria and Sicyon, Adrastus' domain before he ruled Mycenae, men of Hyperesia, Gonessa, perched on hills, men who held Pellene and those who circled Aegion, men of the coastal strip and Helice's broad headland. Then came in 100 ships, and Agamemnon led them on. Atreus' royal son, and marching in his companies came the most and bravest fighting men by far, and there in the midst, armed in gleaming bronze, in all his glory, he towered high over all his fighters. He was the greatest warlord, he led by far the largest army. Next those who held Lacedaemon's hollows deep with gorges, Pharis, Sparta, and Messe, crowded haunt of the wild doves, men who lived in Brisea and Augia's gracious country, men who held Amyclae and Helos, the seaboard fortress, men who settled Las and lived near Otilus. Agamemnon's brother Menelaus, lord of the war cry, led their 60 ships, armed them apart, down shore, and amidst their ranks he marched, ablaze with valor, priming men for attack, and his own heart blazed the most, to avenge the groans and shocks of war they'd borne for Helen. Next the men who lived in Pylos and handsome Arene, Thryon, the Alpheus ford, and finely masoned Api, men who lived in Cyparissus and Amphigenia, Telos, Helos, and Dorion, where the muses met the Thracian Thamyris, stopped the minstrel's song. From Oechalia he came, from Oechalia's king Eurytus, boasting to high heaven that he could outsing the very muses, the daughters of Zeus whose shield resounds with thunder. They were enraged. They maimed him. They ripped away his voice, the rousing immortal wonder of his song, and wiped all arts of harping from his mind. Nestor, the noble old horseman, led those troops in 90 sweeping ships lined up along the shore. And those who held Arcadia under Cylene's peak, near Aptus's ancient tomb where men fight hand to hand, men who lived in Phenios and Orchomenos, rife with sheep, Stratia, Rippi, and Encipe, whipped by the sudden winds, men who settled Tegea, Mantinea's inviting country, men who held Stymphalos, men who ruled Parasia. The son of Ancaeus led them, powerful Agapenor, with 60 ships in all, and aboard each vessel crowded full Arcadian companies skilled in war. Agamemnon himself, the lord of men, had given them those well-bent ships to plow the wine-dark sea, since works of the sea meant nothing to those landsmen. Then the men who lived in Buprasian, brilliant Elis, and all the realm as far as Hermine and Mercinus, frontier towns, and Olinian rock, and Elysian bound within their borders. 4 warlords led their ranks, 10 ship flotillas each, and filling the decks came bands of Epian fighters. 2 companies under Thalpius and Amphimachus, sons of the line of Actor, one of Eurytus, one of Teatus. Strong Diores, the son of Amerinchus, led the 3rd, and the princely Polyxenus led the 4th, the son of King Agasthenes, Augeas' noble stock. Then ocean men from Dulichion and the Holy Islands, and the Echinides rising over the sea from Elis. Meges, a match for Ares, led their troops to war, a son of the rider Phyleus, dear to Zeus, who once, enraged at his father, fled and settled Dulichion. In his son's command sailed 40 long black ships. Next, Odysseus led his Cephalenian companies, gallant-hearted fighters, the island men of Ithaca, of Mount Neriton's leafy ridges shimmering in the wind, and men who lived in Crocylia and rugged Acalypse, men who held Zacynthus and men who dwelled near Samos, and mainland men who grazed their flocks across the channel. That mastermind like Zeus, Odysseus led those fighters on. In his command sailed 12 ships, prows flashing crimson. And Thoas, son of Andraemon, led Aetolia's units, soldiers who lived in Pleuron, Pylene, and Olenus, Calchas along the shore, and Caledon's rocky heights, where the sons of well-born Oeneus were no more, and the king himself was dead, and Meleager with his golden hair was gone. So the rule of all Aetolian men had passed to Thoas, and in Thoas' command sailed 40 long black ships. And the great spearman Idomeneus led his Cretans, the men who held Knossos and Gortyn ringed in walls, Lyctos, Miletus, Lycastus bright chalk bluffs, Phaestus and Rhytion, cities a joy to live in, the men who peopled Crete, 100 cities strong. The renowned spearman Idomeneus led them all in force, with Meriones, who butchered men like the god of war himself, and in their command sailed 80 long black ships. And Heracles' son Tlepolemus, tall and staunch, led 9 ships with the proud Rhodians out of Rhodes, the men who lived on Rhodes in 3 island divisions, Lindos and Elalosus, Camurus' white escarpment, armies led by the famous spearman Tlepolemus, whom Astyochea bore to Heracles, filled with power. He swept her up from Ephyra, from the Selleis River, after he'd ravaged many towns of brave young warlords bred by the gods. But soon as his son Tlepolemus came of age in Heracles' well-built palace walls, the youngster abruptly killed his father's uncle, the good soldier Lycimnius, already up in years, and quickly fitting ships, gathering partisans, he fled across the sea with threats of the sons and the sons of Heracles breaking at his back. But he reached Rhodes at last, a wanderer rocked by storms, and there they settled in 3 divisions, all by tribes, loved by Zeus himself, the king of gods and mortals, showering wondrous gold on all their heads. Nereus led his 3 trim ships from Syme, Nereus the son of Aglaea and King Carapace, Nereus the handsomest man who ever came to Troy, of all the Achaeans after Peleus' fearless son, and he was a lightweight, trailed by a tiny band. And men who held Niceris, Cassus and Crapathus, Kos, Eurypylus town, and the islands called Calydone, combat troops and Antiphus and Phidippus led them on, the 2 sons of the warlord Thessalus, Heracles' son. In their command sailed 30 long curved ships. And now, Muse, sing all those fighting men who lived in Pelasgian Argos, the big contingents out of Alus and Alope and Trachis, men of Thea and Hellas, where the women are a wonder, all the fighters called Achaeans, Hellenes and Myrmidons, ranked in 50 ships, and Achilles was their leader. But they had no lust for the grind of battle now. Where was the man who marched their lines to war? The brilliant runner Achilles lay among his ships, raging over Briseis, the girl with lustrous hair, the prize he seized from Lyrnessus, after he had fought to exhaustion at Lyrnessus, storming the heights and breached the walls of Thebes, and toppled the vaunting spearmen Epistrophus and Mines, sons of King Eunaeus, Celepius' son. All for Briseis, his heart was breaking now. Achilles lay there now, but he would soon rise up in all his power. Then men of Phylace, Parassus banked in flowers, Demeter's closed in holy grove, and Iton mother of flocks, Antron along the shore, and Telos deep in meadows. The veteran Protesilaus had led those troops while he still lived, but now for many years the arms of the black earth had held him fast, and his wife was left behind, alone in Phylace, both cheeks torn in grief, their house half built. Just as he vaulted off his ship, a Dardan killed him, first by far of the Argives slaughtered on the beaches. But not even then were his men without a captain, yearn as they did for their lost leader. No, Podarces, a fresh campaigner, ranged their units, a son of Iphiclus, son of Phylacus, rich in flocks, Podarces, gallant Protesilaus' brother, younger born, but the older man proved braver too, an iron man of war. Yet not for a moment did his army lack a leader, yearn as they did for the braver dead. Under Podarces sailed their 40 long black ships. And the men who lived in Pherae, fronting Lake Boebius, in Boebi and Glaphyrae and Iolcos sturdy ramparts, their 11 ships were led by Admetus' favorite son, Eumelus, born to Admetus by Alcestis, queen of women, the most radiant daughter Peleus ever fathered. Then men who lived in Methone and Dalmatia, men who held Meliboa and rigid Olizon. Philoctetes, the master archer, led them on, in 7 ships with 50 oarsmen aboard each, superbly skilled with the bow and lethal combat. But their captain lay on an island racked with pain, on Lemnos' holy shores where the armies had marooned him, agonized by his wound, the bite of a deadly water viper. There he writhed in pain, but soon, encamped by the ships, the Argives would recall Philoctetes, their great king. But not even then were his men without a captain, yearn as they did for their lost leader. No, Medon formed them up, Oileus' bastard son, whom Ren bore to Oileus, grim raider of cities. The men who settled Tricca, rocky Ithome, terraced high, and men who held Ocalia, Ocalian Eurytus' city. The 2 sons of Asclepius led their units now, both skilled healers, Podalirius and Machaon. In their command sailed 40 curved black ships. And men who held Ormenion and the Hyperion spring, men who held Asterion, Titanos' chalk-white cliffs. Eurypylus marched them on, Eumon's shining sun. In his command sailed 40 long black ships. And the men who settled Argissa and Girton, Orthe, Elone, the gleaming citadel Eloson. Polypodes, braced for battle, led them on, the son of Pirithous, son of deathless Zeus. Famous Hippodamia bore the warrior to Pirithous. That day he wreaked revenge on the shaggy centaurs, routed them out of Pelion, drove them to the Athaces. Polypodes was not alone. Leonteus shared the helm, companion of Ares, Caenis' grandson, proud Coronis' son, and in his command sailed 40 long black ships. And Gunius out of Siphths led on 22 ships, and in his platoons came Ennienes and battle-tried Parabians, who pitched homes in the teeth of Dodono's bitter winters, who held the tilled acres along the lovely Tarasis that runs her pure crystal currents into Peneus, never mixed with Peneus' eddies, glistening silt, but gliding over the surface smooth as olive oil, branching, breaking away from the river Styx, the dark and terrible oath stream of the gods. And Prothous, son of Tenthredon, led the Magnesians, men who lived around the Peneus, up along Mount Pelion, sloped in wind-whipped leaves. Raced Prothous led them on, and in his command sailed 40 long black ships. These were the captains of Achaea and the kings. Now tell me, Muse, who were the bravest of them all, of the men and chariot teams that came with Atreus' sons? The best by far of the teams were Eumelus' mares, and Pheres' grandson drove them. Swift as birds, matched in age and their glossy coats, and matched to a builder's level flat across their backs. Phoebus Apollo, lord of the silver bow, had bred them both in Perea, a brace of mares that raced the war god's panic through the lines. But best by far of the men was Telamonian Ajax, while Achilles raged apart. The famed Achilles towered over them all, he and the battle team that bore the peerless son of Peleus into war. But off in his beaked sea-going ships he lay, raging away at Atrides Agamemnon, king of armies, while his men sported along the surf, marking time, hurling the discus, throwing spears, and testing bows. And the horses, each beside its chariot, champing clover and parsley from the marshes, waited, pawing idly. Their master's chariot stood under the blankets now, stored away in the tents, while the rank and file, yearning for their leader, the great man of war, drifting here and there throughout the encampment, hung back from the fighting. But on the armies came as if the whole earth were devoured by wildfire, yes, and the ground thundered under them, deep as it does for Zeus who loves the lightning, Zeus in all his rage when he lashes the ground around Typhoeus and Arima, there where they say the monster makes his bed of pain. So the earth thundered under their feet, armies trampling, sweeping through the plain at blazing speed. Now the Trojans, Iris, the wind-quick messenger, hurried down to Ilium, bearing her painful message sent by storming Zeus. The Trojans, assembled hard by Priam's gates, gathered together there, young men and old, and rushing closer, racing Iris addressed them, keying her voice to that of Priam's son Polites. He had kept a watch for the Trojans, posted atop old Esthetes' tomb, and poised to sprint for home at the first sign of Argives charging from the ships. Like him to the life, the racing Iris urged. Old Priam, words, endless words, that is your passion always, as once in the days of peace. But ceaseless wars upon us. Time and again I've gone to battle, fought with men, but I've never seen an army as great as this. Too much, like piling leaves or sand, and on they come, advancing across the plain to fight before our gates. Hector, I urge you first of all, do as I tell you. Armies of allies crowd the mighty city of Priam, true, but they speak 1,000 different tongues, fighters gathered here from all ends of the realm. Let each chief give commands to the tribe he leads, move them out, marshal his own contingents, now. Hector missed nothing, that was a goddess' call. He broke up the assembly at once, they rushed to arms, and all the gates flung wide and the Trojan mass surged out, horses, chariots, men on foot, a tremendous roar went up. Now a sharp bridge rises out in front of Troy, all on its own and far across the plain with running room around it, all sides clear. Men call it Thicket Ridge, the immortals call it the leaping Amazon Myrine's mounted tomb. And there the Trojans and allies range their troops for battle. First, tall Hector with helmet flashing led the Trojans, Priam's son, and in his command, by far the greatest, bravest army, divisions harnessed in armor, veterans bristling spears. And the noble son of Anchises led the Dardanians, Aeneas, whom the radiant Aphrodite bore Anchises down the folds of Ida, a goddess bedded with a man, not Aeneas alone, but flanked by Antenor's 2 sons, Acamas and Archilochus, trained for every foray. And men who lived in Zelia under the foot of Ida, a wealthy clan that drank the Aesopus' dark waters, Trojans all, and the shining son of Lycaon led them on, Pandarus, with the bow that came from Apollo's own hand. And the men who held the land of Apessus and Adrestia, men who held Patea, Pteria's steep peaks, the units led by Adrestus, joined by Amphius, trim in linen corslet, and the 2 good sons of Meropes out of Percote harbor, Meropes adept beyond all men in the mantic arts. He refused to let his 2 boys march to war, this man-killing war, but the young ones fought him all the way. The forces of Black Death drove them on. And the men who lived around Percote and Practios, men who settled Sestos, Abydos, and gleaming Arisbe. Asius, son of Hyrtacus, led them on, captain of armies. Hyrtacus' offspring Asius, hulking, fiery stallions bore him in from Arisbe, from the Selleis River. Hippothos led the Pelasgian tribes of spearmen, fighters who worked Larissa's dark rich plowland. Hippothos and Peleus, tested soldier, led them on, both sons of Pelasgian Lethus, to Tamaskion. Acamas and the old hero Pyrrhus led the Thracians, all the Hellespont bounds within her riptide straits. Euphemus led the Cacones, fighters armed with spears, son of Trosanus, Cia's son, a warlord bred by the gods. Pyrachemes led the Paeonians, reflex bows in hand, hailing from Amadon far west and the broad river Axius, clearest stream that flows across the earth. That burly heart Pylamenes led his Paphlagonians out of Venetian country, land where the wild mules breed. The men who held Sitoris and lived in a range of Sesamus, building their storied halls across the Parthenius River at Cromna, Aegialus and the highland fortress Erythine. Odius and Epistrophus led the Halizonians out of Alabe, miles east where the mother lode of silver came to birth. Chromis led the Mysian men with an enemous seer of birds, but none of his winged signs could beat off Black Death. Down he went, crushed by racing Achilles' hands, destroyed in the river where he slaughtered other Trojans too. Ascanius, strong as a god, and Phorcys led the Phrygians in from Ascania due east, primed for the clash of combat. Mesthles and Antiphus led Maeonia's proud contingent. Talamenes' 2 sons, sprung from the nymph of Gyge Lake, led on Maeonian units born and bred under Mount Tmolus. Nastes led the Carians, wild with barbarous tongues, men who held Miletus, Theres' ridges thick with timber, Meander's currents and Mount Mycale's craggy peaks. Amphimachus and Nastes led their formations on, Nastes and Amphimachus, Nomian's flamboyant sons. Nastes strolled to battle decked in gold like a girl, the fool, none of his trappings kept off grisly death. Down he went, crushed by racing Achilles' hands, destroyed at the ford where battle-hard Achilles stripped his gold away. And last Sarpedon and valiant Glaucus marched the Lycians on from Lycia far south, from the Xanthus' swirling rapids.